Good morning, everybody. Dan Aberhart here from Aberhart Ag Solutions. It's Monday, September 4th. It's the long weekend. Why we decided to have this on the long weekend, Lord knows why, but hopefully you guys are going to enjoy the webinar that's ahead of us here. We've got some high-value data from Elston Solberg that I was so excited about getting out there. We just had to get it out as soon as possible once I understood what he had his hands on there in terms of data. And everybody's busy harvesting as well. I think that's going quite well, and I'm excited to actually get out and perhaps see the combine at home later today. That should be really good. Today is all about getting the producer more data, and we are recording this webinar for posterity. We're going to be sharing it on different platforms. You guys will have the opportunity to watch it later at your convenience. And our agenda is I'm going to give you guys a brief overview of the Bio-Sul product, the Bio-Sul business, the value proposition, the why of Bio-Sul, and a little bit about the nuts and bolts of the business and getting the product and so forth. And then I'm going to turn it over to Elston to share some of what he has been working on, which I think really reinforces our whole product story, and I'm really glad to see some more information coming to light over time. I like to start with some light material just to get the blood flowing, 7 a.m. Monday morning. And this game is for Elston. I want to know, Elston, how many of these facts about sulfur you knew previously. So the first fun fact about sulfur is that sulfur dioxide has been used to preserve wine for millennia and remains an ingredient in wine today. Fun fact. Hot springs full of dissolved sulfur compounds may have a questionable smell, but they've long been prized for their supposed medicinal qualities. The town of Hot Sulphur Springs, Colorado, for example, sprang up in 1860 after white settlers discovered sulfur springs that Ute Indians had been soaking in for centuries. Sulfur can do a number on shipwrecks. Did you know that, Elston? A 2008 study of a Swedish warship that sank in 1628 found more than 2 tons of sulfur impregnating the timbers of the salvaged vessel.
Did not know that.
I thought you might not know that one. And this one's pretty specific. Conventional oil and gas reserves are about 1 to 5% sulfur. More and more, however, oil and gas exploration is tapping into unconventional reservoirs filled with nastier stuff. The oil from tar sands is 20% sulfur. Some new fields in the Middle East are producing oil that's up to 40% sulfur. So this is quite specific, but it's interesting, pertinent to our business, given there's going to be more and more sulfur produced worldwide that need somewhere to go, and we want it to go on farmers' fields in Western Canada. Obviously, you knew this also, but I don't know if you knew the specifics of that. But did you know that sulfur is thought to be the 7th most common element in the human body? Point score on this also. Did I stump you at least a couple times?
No. Well, a couple times, yeah.
Perfect.
Sulfur is amazing.
It's Elston's passion, and obviously we've been enjoying it as well. Whenever we start talking to a producer, I think the important thing is to talk about why Bio-Sul. Why does a producer care? Why does a producer is he concerned with sulfur? And I've been working with this product for 2 years, and I've been pretty honored in my career to be working with products that I feel have brought extreme value to the producer over time. Whatever it was I've been selling, it makes me look like a good salesperson when you have something like this to bring to market. What I like about Bio-Sul is how all the dominoes sort of fall in succession here, and one thing leads to another. And it really does all tie together really nicely, and for a lot of producers, I think it's a challenge to look at this product and say, well, where's the Achilles heel, and what's the drawback, and is it too good to be true? The price point of the product leads into the agronomy of the product, leads into the logistics play, and it's all wrapped together, tied together neatly in a bow with the sustainability story. And that's what I'm going to give you guys a brief overview on today, is just how all these things tie together to work in tandem to make this a great option for your farm. And you can put this price point wherever you want, at the beginning of the process or the end of the process, but I think for today's conversation, I wanted to put it right at the front, simply because with the price point that we have on this product, which is a half to a third of the cost of the actual pound of sulfur than a lot of other products, it allows us to execute our agronomic strategy, which allows us to tackle the logistics, which is a major concern for producers, and create a whole different strategy than guys have been doing in the past. And without that price point being what it is, we simply could not do what we're doing with Bio-Sul. If you were paying the price per pound of actual S in Bio-Sul that you were in some other premium products, you simply could not put on the amounts that we're putting on. And our strategy is such that we're putting on large amounts on top of the soil surface to amortize out over time and release gently into the soil in conjunction with good growing conditions. And here's a breakdown. This is available on our website. It's under the home page. You can go to compare ours to theirs, hit the button, and you'll get this sheet. Here's our strategy, and a lot of it does revolve around our excellent price point. So what we're doing is we're putting down 220 pounds of product. Our minimum guaranteed label is 70%. So the analysis of the product is 00070. Often we're blending it higher because of the variable nature of the product. So that's going to give you over 154 pounds of actual S. Or if you amortize that perfectly over 5 years, you're going to be at over 30, slightly over 30 pounds of actual S in a year. And if you take a look, we can plug whatever numbers are pertinent or relevant at the time into this calculator, right from urea to phos to other competitive products. But what you're going to find is that the price of Bio-Sul here is 18 cents per pound, and your typical ammonium sulfate, even with nitrogen at 380, is going to be about 40 cents a pound. So for 28 bucks of sulfur, 280 a ton, we're doing 10 acres per ton with the product. You're going to have over 150 pounds of actual S. And that's where this whole concept starts to feed into the agronomy, which is I know Elston's going to share more with us about the agronomy, and feel free to jump in anytime. But the beauty is, with the price point, we can afford to get more product down for a longer period of time. And what that's going to do for us is going to allow us to put this one unique nutrient into the soil bank long term that's going to give us the right product agronomically and also logistically. So with the variable particle size of this product, it releases at different rates according to the surface area of that particle. So we have some particles that are as fine as dust, and we have some particles that are up to pea size. It really varies, and that's part of the beauty of the product. And I'll talk a little bit later about the spreading of it and how we're able to accurately spread that product despite the variability of the product. But because of the price point of this product, we can afford to get a whole whack of product down. And the funny part is that some producers have asked, why don't we make this a 10-year product? And I suppose we could double the rates, Elston, and go with a longer period of time. But the reality is, you're going to be in a building program with sulfur. You put 220 pounds down now, you get 150 some pounds of actual S. You put down again in 5 years, you're going to have 300 pounds of actual S. Most producers, I don't think, are putting more than 50, 60, 70 pounds of actual S down in a 5-year period. And that's because of the price point of that ammonium sulfate actual S, and the logistics of trying to get that much product down is absolutely unfeasible to get it through your seeder. So we've got a variable particle size product that releases with the proper temperature, moisture, oxygen, which all leads to the rates of biological activity, which in turn converts that elemental sulfur to sulfate form that the plant can use and take up, and away you go. And the beauty is that agronomically, it's a low salt product. You're going to experience less leaching in wet conditions. It doesn't amortize at the same rate in drier conditions. So it's something that releases in conjunction with what we would consider to be large crops, good growing conditions, and sync with Mother Nature. And one application of elemental sulfur will tend to speed up the next application of elemental sulfur and increase the biological activity. And biological activity is something that people are really turning towards in terms of sustainable agriculture long term, and we're really excited that we have that element in our product. This in turn leads to a huge advantage in terms of logistics. Our guys are going out now, and of course they all have spreaders now. So when you have that spreading capability, maybe you're just spreading your sulfur, but a lot of guys are spreading their nitrogen too, and what do you end up with? You got seed and phos in your drill, and your drill is many times over more efficient than previous. And with the cost of, I don't know what the cost of this particular item is, but big iron has certainly not gone down in value. And more, I think farmers are trying to get more efficient through applying nutrients on top. And this product really plays into it. In fact, what we're seeing with a lot of guys is it makes sense for a lot of guys to get one of our trusted applicators to do a custom job, but they're also finding that the product, the savings on the product, can help cash flow the iron. So that's a really big play. Now, how many years does Bio-Sul last? How many years will you be able to get out of putting ammonium sulfate through your drill once you apply Bio-Sul once at the rates that we're recommending? Well, it really varies, right? You have your yield and your different crop uptake based on the crop itself, and you have different soil conditions. But the way that we manhandle that is through tissue testing to see exactly what's in the plant at any given time and keep our eye on that in terms of sulfur deficiency. But we're getting into the stage now with the life cycle of this product that we do have data on 4 and 5 years, and that Bio-Sul product is still going very strong. And we were out at Terry's field day the other day, and he's already into his 3rd crop on some of his Bio-Sul applications, and it's going very strong. And the interesting thing that we see with Bio-Sul is it's actually making macros and micros more efficient, and maybe Elston can touch on that a little bit later, how it seems to be releasing these nutrients in the soil and making the other nutrients more efficient. And I think that's something we have to consider as we look at the price point on this product as well. What is it doing for other nutrients? Is it enhancing the value of the other nutrients that we place in the soil with the sulfur? We believe the answer is yes, and that more and more data will be showing that. So when we talk about sustainability, of course, it's a fun hashtag keyword, and it's something that policy and politicians and the consumer respond to. We need these stories long term to show that we are being careful stewards of our resource in land and producing food. But sustainability also means we can afford to do the right things long term. And when I think about sustainability, I'm thinking about a lot of people these days are thinking more about the life in their soil, the biological activity, and building their soils to continue to produce good crops long term. And I think that our sulfur product with the biological activity baked into it, inherent in the compost, is a big part of that. What is the product? It's compost that's being blended with elemental sulfur. And the really cool part is, and I think Elston's going to touch on this a little bit longer once I get done. I'm about 17 minutes into this, I think. We're going to tell you a little bit more about the biology that's going on in this product, which is really unique, and I think is something that producers will have a lot of interest in, because there are bugs in the product. We are working to figure out exactly what those bugs are and what value they bring. And I think for a lot of companies that are in the input business, this is going to be a bigger theme as we go forward. A little bit about, excuse me, the nuts and bolts of this product now. One of the unique properties of this elemental sulfur, co-composted elemental sulfur, is that it stores on the ground, and this removes the need for, again, the expense of bins and other handling means. And the nice part is it doesn't get stuck up in your bins. If you ever had some ammonium sulfate that got some moisture into it and you had to take it out with the excavator claw, you'll know what I'm talking about. But this product stores on the ground, and it can be exposed to the elements. Both of the raw materials, the compost and the elemental sulfur, are typically stored outside. So you could even argue that as it is stored outside with the biological activity in the compost, it's actually enhancing the product over time as the biological activity continues on in there. But we have been storing it in pads, central pads, and tendering it out to customers from there. We've also been putting it on customers' fields when it's appropriate, but just to keep in mind, of course, the pH is low enough that where we place the product, you can have some inhibition of further crop growth there because of the pH. And we just want to be mindful of that. But it's super simple. This is similar to the way lime is handled around the world, and it makes for pretty low-cost storage of the product, super low cost. And what we do in terms of getting the product on, you saw the end dump there. It's delivered in side dumps as well. It's 40 metric ton loads typically, which do 400 acres per load. Once we get it, however we're going to tender it, I'll show you a little bit more about how we tender it here shortly. But one of the key things that I want you guys to understand is that we can apply this product super accurately. And the way that we do that, it's very hard to get your head wrapped around the concept of spinning fertilizer until you have the benefit of the pan testing, the visuals of the pan testing. So we have a rope that's marked out every 6 feet. We put down very sophisticated tools, basically kitty litter pans, and we run over them so that we get a visual on a pattern. And at the end of the day, we should be able to do 3 different passes, one down the center and one on either side, and have extremely accurate application, not only of volume in each vial, but we should have a fair distribution of the particle sizes evenly in each product vial. We don't want to have one vial that has nothing but big chunks and one vial that has nothing but extremely fine material. It's not our goal. We want to make sure the fines get on, because the fine product is what's most available, fastest to the field, and that is why, with the combination of biological activity, variable particle size, and getting those fines on evenly, and the rates that we're using, you can see a response on sulfur-deficient hayland in 1 week, which I know we did this spring in the Solsgers, Manitoba area, and also Elston's got a ton of other examples of that sort of thing. So, despite the industry sort of tagline that elemental sulfur is not available, we're seeing this product applied and seeing a visual response on sulfur-deficient hayland in a very short period of time. So people in the network that are using this product are either loading it very simply with a loader off the ground, or they're handling it with live bottoms as well and conveyors. And of course, as the network evolves, we're seeing more and more sophisticated and more efficient levels of equipment and service. And the beauty of this product is, with the price point, it can be a really good decision just to let another professional handle this sulfur aspect for you. Simply provide the legals and go from there. It's been a pretty interesting business for us. This is 2 years ago in July of 2015. Elston was at our very first meeting, and since then we've set up a dealer network of approximately 44 guys in the network. You can go to our website and see all of our applicators here their locations and their contact. Our concept is that people in their community are the best people to bring the product to market, people that are known and liked and trusted locally with reputations and professional people that can market and spread the product locally. And so our dealer network consists of large farmers and agronomists, seed retailers, and of course retailers, some more sophisticated retailers. And that's really been growing. I think people have really enjoyed being part of that network. And it's been a lot of fun to grow the business. We had over 300,000 acres of this product down this year, and we're hoping to increase that by quite a bit this year. And our team has grown a lot. We are the wholesaler and distributor of this product in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, Aberhart Ag Solutions. And a very interesting evolution has been occurring with the product. Now the product is essentially owned by Green for Life GFL, which is an extremely large waste management company that operates on a whole bunch of different fronts all over the place. And so the exciting part is that they have the resources and the know-how and the corporate gusto to help scale this product into the market demand, which we anticipate will continue to be pretty significant. So that has been a very interesting part of the product story as it's evolved in sophistication with our partners that manufacture it. That's pretty cool stuff. So that's my overview on Bio-Sul. If you guys have any questions for me or Elston at any time, please text me. My number is 204-573-2069. And I think if you don't have any other comments on my presentation there, Elston, I'll just hand it off to you.
Yeah, no, you did a good job, Dan. It's good to be here this morning again. And if you can just help me with advancing of the slides, that'd be perfect. So good morning, everybody, from wonderful downtown Devon, Alberta. It's a bright, sunny day. It's a holiday, and it's great to be here. So I just want to spend a few minutes sharing a little bit of information with everybody, just with the hopes of increasing everyone's confidence in this product. Not that I'm sure I need to do that, but there's been some pretty good interaction, some new data coming in from third-party people, et cetera, that Dan and I would like to share with everybody. So if you can just click on through, that'd be great, Dano. And to some extent, Dan has created a bit of a monster with these GIF files and stuff. So everything that Dan said is about keep it simple sulfur. It's one of the reasons that I decided to do what I've done the last year or so, year and a half, I guess now, almost. Bio-Sul Premium Plus for me, is a game changer. Okay, so on to some of the issues that I'd like to discuss this morning. I have been running into a host of objections, one of which reared its head recently in a certain geography of Alberta, and that is many growers are kind of hooked on broadcasting ammonium sulfate in the fall. And while ammonium sulfate is an awesome product, delivering nitrogen and sulfur, there apparently is a bit of a misunderstanding about the nitrogen side and the sulfur side of ammonium sulfate. And that is, when you apply ammonium sulfate, you have readily available nitrogen and sulfur. If you're into a sulfur deficient situation while the crop is growing, it's an awesome go-to product to literally turn that crop around overnight. Ammonium thiosulfate will do the same thing. But when you're fall applying ammonium sulfate or ammonium thiosulfate, there's some basic fundamentals that need to be thought about. And what it really boils down to is the nitrogen cycle. So when you're broadcasting any nitrogen product, in this case ammonium sulfate, once the nitrogen portion hits the ground, the bugs start working at it, and they start converting it from a stable form of nitrogen, NH4 ammonium nitrogen, to nitrate nitrogen. And once the nitrogen is in the nitrate form, it is now subject to a number of different loss mechanisms. Leaching is one of them. Denitrification in the spring when the soil is saturated is another. Ammonium sulfate can be volatilized or turned into NH3 gas and lost to the atmosphere. Whenever you're broadcasting any product, especially nitrogen and sulfur, the soil organisms can utilize that nitrogen and that sulfur for decomposition or for building their populations, and so we call that immobilization. So at the end of the day, you have a number of different factors that you have to consider when you're using the strategy of broadcast ammonium sulfate or ammonium thiosulfate as well, and that is you have to think about leaching losses, you have to think about volatilization losses, you have to think about denitrification losses, and you have to think about immobilization. And in some cases, immobilization could be argued to be a good thing. But at the end of the day, if you're putting ammonium sulfate on in the fall, the net effect or the net efficiency of the nitrogen and the sulfur next spring is going to be reduced. And you need to factor that into not only your crop needs, but also into the economic side of the equation. And then the other piece in this slide is that ammonium sulfate is very acidulating. It's chemically acidulating, and it's a salt as well. So you have to kind of factor that into your decision making as well. A lot of people talk about the acidulation component of elemental sulfur. Most of the industry, most farmers do not realize that virtually every fertilizer that they apply, with the exception of potash, they're applying acid, and ammonium sulfate is an extremely acidulating product. On top of all that, and it's chemically acidulating, which means it's instant. It's like whammo, whereas elemental sulfur Bio-Sul Premium Plus is a biological product which does create some acid, but it does it in a very slow biological manner. And from a plant's perspective, the acidulation from ammonium sulfate is dramatically different than the acidulation from an elemental sulfur fertilizer or compost like Bio-Sul. So just if you're running up against some objections for the applicators out there when it comes to broadcast ammonium sulfate, just remind the growers that there are other factors that they need to consider, basically the nitrogen cycle and the components of that nitrogen cycle that can impact, in some cases dramatically, the availability of that nitrogen and that sulfur in the spring from a fall application.
Elston, do you have any, would you have any scope of a range of numbers on the loss of nitrogen? And if you're looking at the cost of nitrogen per pound that you're applying in the fall, how much of that might you lose depending on conditions?
Well, it can range anywhere from 10% to 50%. So depending on environmental conditions, if you broadcast ammonium sulfate in the fall and then you have an open fall, warm winter, most of the nitrogen is going to convert to nitrate. If the spring is saturated, you can easily lose 20 to 50% just in a couple of events in the spring with saturated soil conditions through the process of denitrification, and that's not even talking about the potential for leaching or volatilization or contemplating how much nitrogen is being immobilized by the organisms in the soil when they're breaking down straw, et cetera. So 10 to 50% is kind of where I would ballpark it.
Perfect, thank you.
No worries. Next slide there, buddy. Okay.
What is that exactly, Elston?
Supposed to be one of your famous GIFs, so for whatever reason it isn't doing it. So. Okay, so here's the nitrogen cycle. Again, ammonium sulfate can be volatilized when it's applied. It can be leached once it's converted to nitrate. It can be denitrified once it's converted to nitrate, and it can be immobilized. Some of it will be immobilized just by default. So when you run into the situation where a grower tells you, yeah, but I broadcast ammonium sulfate, it's fine. Just remind them that that there's these other processes at work. Okay, Daniel. So a few weeks ago, we did a bunch of training and we did a bunch of field days down at a site near Olds, which also happens to be a site that is part of the Canola 100 experience this year. And it occurred to me when I was down there talking to literally hundreds of people that there are a number of growers out there that are using Bio-Sul as their foundation for their Canola 100 efforts. And this is a vegetation index map of the Olds site that is participating in the Canola 100. And looking at this vegetation map, what I would ask the group out there to consider is which side of this field was Bio-Sul applied to. Was it applied to the west side, or was it applied to the east side, the west side being the left-hand side of this photo, this vegetation index map, and yes, that's where the Bio-Sul was applied. So you can see a much higher vegetation index on that part of the field, and the northwest corner of that field is indeed where the Canola 100 trial is. And upon reflection, if I think about a number of sites where guys are attempting to grow 100 bushel canola, one of the foundational pieces is Bio-Sul or some other application of large amounts of elemental sulfur. And I think, I think that evidence like this is pretty indicative of how successful that foundational management can be. Dan did a really good job of talking about logistics and everything else. From a plant's perspective, it's information like this that's pretty darn powerful in my estimation when it comes to the whole discussion of Bio-Sul and the path forward when we're trying to grow these huge yields. Next, Dan.
And how does the vegetation index here typically translate into yields in your experience?
Well, typically, I mean, the whole reason of doing this is, when you have a higher vegetation index, a higher biomass of material, that generally is correlated to higher yields. And, that's assuming that the foundational nutrient management and everything else is in place. And I guess time will tell us what's going to happen here with this Canola 100, but I'm directly connected to some other fields and some other growers that are attempting to grow 100 bushel canola, and one of their foundational pieces is large amounts of sulfur in the form of Bio-Sul, and in some cases not 220 pounds per acre, but 300 plus pounds per acre. And when we look at their satellite imagery, those areas that have had higher rates of Bio-Sul applied have a much higher vegetation index. And so it's just another way of giving a grower or an agronomist some information about the probability of higher yields. Next demo. Keep going. So proofs in the pudding. All right. I want to take you to another situation that's showing up in a number of geographies. Growers will put down Bio-Sul, and then they'll go out and tissue sample because they know that soil sampling is kind of a waste of time when it comes to sulfur because of the variability. And here's an example where sulfur was applied in the spring, I believe, here. Grower goes out, the agronomist goes out, takes a sample. Wow, look at the sample, analyzes or takes a sample of the newest tissue. You always want to take the newest tissue because sulfur, once it's inside the plant, cannot be cannibalized and moved to the new tissue. So if you're going to see a sulfur deficiency, it's always going to show up in the newest tissue first. So when you're tissue sampling, please, 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 tissue sample the newest tissue. So the grower goes out, the agronomist goes out, takes a tissue sample, and kaboom, kabang, we're seeing this in many, 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 many samples. This is a third-party job. We got 1.16% sulfur in the newest tissue. Awesome. Remembering that elemental sulfur isn't available in year one, according to many of the agronomists out there. And my short and succinct answer to that is bullshit. We've got 1.16% sulfur in the tissue. And then certain labs like A&L will say the very high level of sulfur in this sample may be from contamination with sprayer dust. And so then a number of agronomists or farmers will say, yeah, so we got lots of sulfur here, but the reason we have lots of sulfur here is because the sample is contaminated with soil. One way that you can determine whether or not that statement is true or not is to look at the level of iron and aluminum in the tissue sample. Soil is loaded with iron. Soil is loaded with aluminum. So if your tissue sample is contaminated with soil, you will have extremely high levels of iron and aluminum in your tissue sample. So in this case, iron levels are moderate to low, aluminum levels are low, and so the assertion that some agronomists would make that when you see sulfur levels this high, that sulfur level is a result of soil contamination, again, is complete baloney because the tissue is telling you that the iron and the aluminum levels are low. And again, soil is loaded in iron, soil is loaded in aluminum. If the sample is contaminated with soil, you will have very high levels of iron and aluminum. I hope that makes sense for everybody because we're seeing lots and lots of tissues coming back with exceptionally high sulfur, which is awesome from a plant's perspective. The number one ratio as agronomists and farmers that we need to get in order is the nitrogen to sulfur ratio because of the huge impact sulfur has on amino acids and proteins in a plant. And when you're seeing sulfur numbers like this, that's telling you that your program is working, and there is no connection in this case with soil contamination. Next demo.
Elston, can we just circle back to this Canola 100? I had a question here via text. Thanks for the question. Good question. Question is, what other nutrients have been applied to this, if you know, or what were the fertilizer rates on each side of this Canola 100 field?
So the fertility package in large part was very similar. The big difference on the west side of the field was the foundation of Bio-Sul. And up in the northwest corner, there would have been post this imagery would have been some in-crop application of nitrogen and stuff to try to push yield. So the field was managed nutritionally very similarly, except for the west side was Bio-Sul.
Cool.
Okay, so just continuing on with this whole deal about, I don't know why the GIFs aren't working, but worst case scenario. I want to take you to a worst case scenario. If we as a group were going to design a worst case scenario, basically if we were going to design an experiment or a real world situation where we were trying to break Bio-Sul to show that it wouldn't work, the way we would do that is we would apply Bio-Sul after seeding in an environment where there has been no rain, in an environment where the soil, surface soil was incredibly dry, and in a field where the grower has had a weak sulfur program in the past. So maybe a program where you're putting on 20 pounds of sulfur or something like that, only in the canola portion of the rotation. And by happenstance, we actually stumbled into one of those this year. Crop was seeded. Bio-Sul was put on a week or so after seeding. Soil was incredibly dry. Surface soil was incredibly dry. There was lots of subsoil moisture. No rain, and not the strongest sulfur program on the planet. And what you're looking at here is two different tissue samples from another lab now. The healthy part of the field had a fair bit of sulfur, certainly within the range that you would expect the sulfur to be. And then there were patches in the field, which is typical of sulfur deficiency, scattered across the field where the plants were not doing that well. And the tissue sample from the newest leaf, again, we needed to grab the newest leaf in all circumstances, was well below the accepted range for canola at that growth stage. So, alarm bells are going off, recognizing that this is indeed a worst case scenario. And what I suggested to this third party, one of the network members, is, rush back to the field as soon as you can and grab tissue samples from the good areas and the bad areas. And ideally, if you could grab old leaves and new leaves, that would be perfect. So again, just to restate, the canola was seeded, the Bio-Sul was applied some time after seeding, the soil was dry, there had been no rain, and the program had been weak, and there were parts of the field that were messed up. So the individual went back and tissue sampled the area about a week or 10 days later. And in that period of time, there was 3/4 of an inch of rain that fell out of the sky. And when they returned to the field, they couldn't find the spots in the field anymore. They had basically vanished. And look at the sulfur levels. They've gone up from, acceptable ranges to 1.77% sulfur, which is a very large amount of sulfur, and all of this as a result of 3/4 of an inch of rain after the initial sampling. So the deficient areas vanished, and where the tissues were taken, there was an exceptional amounts of sulfur in the newest tissue. So once again, people that tell you that elemental sulfur is not available in the first year of application, this number is staggering. There's been a staggering release of sulfur from the Bio-Sul in a very short period of time under a worst case scenario, and again gives me incredible confidence in the product. Okay, continue. So here's some more third-party stuff. This is now from the Westlock Barhead area of Alberta. Bio-Sul was applied to this field. This is a guy that's just kind of testing the waters. North half of the field had Bio-Sul applied in the fall, 220 pounds per acre. Third-party agronomist goes out and looks at, takes tissue samples to look at the sulfur levels in the plant, and you can see we're doing really well here. We've got 0.76% sulfur. Our N/S ratio is awesome. This grower wasn't convinced that there would be enough sulfur available in year one. So if you click forward, Daniel, the south side of the field had Bio-Sul applied to it, but in the spring it also had an extra dollop of ammonium sulfate on the normal program that this grower uses, and you can see that the sulfur levels are strong, but essentially the same as the Bio-Sul by itself in the fall. So I think if you click forward, there's a side-by-side comparison. The top is Bio-Sul alone, the bottom is Bio-Sul with ammonium sulfate, and for some growers, when they're just first starting with Bio-Sul, they find some comfort in applying a small amount of ammonium sulfate sort of as a bridging program. I'm of the opinion that that's not necessary, but if a grower wants to do that just to be more confident in what's going on in that field, then it's not a bad strategy, just to be double, triple safe. But we're seeing results like this over and over and over again. Next, Daniel. So continuing, some of you have seen this in the past. Just want to show you this again. This is spring applied Bio-Sul versus no Bio-Sul on a sulfur deficient soil. We didn't, third-party folks sampled this. This is from last year now. Just click ahead, Daniel. Where the Bio-Sul was applied, we've got 1.74% sulfur in the newest leaves, and we can see that the iron levels are not elevated, so there's not contamination here. In fact, the check treatment has more iron in it than does the Bio-Sul treatment. If we look at the newest leaves of the check with no Bio-Sul, very much lower levels of sulfur. If you compare the two treatments in the same field, you'll see not only are the sulfur levels elevated, but most of the other nutrients are also elevated. And Dan kind of alluded to this earlier, where we're seeing with Bio-Sul, we not only increase the amount of sulfur in the plant, but oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, we see elevated levels of other nutrients in the plant, and part of that has to do with the microcidulation around that elemental sulfur particle, releasing all kinds of other nutrients that become available to the rooting system once it finds that sulfur. So again, spring applied prior to seeding, root tissue, the Bio-Sul application versus the no Bio-Sul, you're going to get significant release of sulfur from the Bio-Sul in the year of application. Next, Daniel. Hello, Daniel.
Yeah, Mike, can you give me a moment here, Elston? Oops.
So
okay.
while we're fighting computers, I think what we've learned over the last couple of years, or at least what I've learned over the last couple of years, and especially this year with a lot of third-party data that's coming in, and there's going to be a lot more of it shortly scattered across Western Canada, is that one of the concerns, initial concerns, was that Bio-Sul would not be available in year one. I think we've pretty conclusively showed over and over and over and over again, even in worst case scenarios, that if Mother Nature is even the least bit cooperative, there is no problem in year one. And what we're seeing with a lot of the results is that the concern or the desire to have a bridging program with some ammonium sulfate or ammonium thiosulfate doesn't seem to be needed. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with the grower going to a bridging program if they want to, but there doesn't seem to be any evidence to show that it's necessary. Other things, you know, where we're seeing the foundational components of a Bio-Sul program, or for that matter, any elemental sulfur program with higher rates being utilized in competitions like the Canola 100, and seeing some of the satellite imagery and stuff that's associated with that, again, gives me a lot of confidence in what we're attempting to do here. And yeah, it's just, the data is just like really, really consistent, and as far as I'm concerned, extremely powerful when it comes to the management of something as simple as a sulfur in the compost. You got a beat there, Daniel?
No, I'm having a challenge logging in here. I'm not sure why. Graham, are you on the call? Can you star 6, Graham? Did you happen to log in? It looks like I'm locked out of the meeting. And I can't see if everybody's still on the call. Elston, can you see if everybody's still on the call? Oh, there we go.
There's 12 people on the call.
Okay. Can you see my screen again?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Share screen, okay. I don't know, it looks like we're back up and running here. We are rocking and rolling again. So.
No, go back a couple. Yeah.
Right there?
All right. Yeah, go ahead one. Nope, sorry, back. The other, keep going. Keep going, one more. Okay, you can go ahead of this one, and I think we're good. So this field trial basically corroborated with the third-party stuff that Alberta Innovates did 3 or 4 years ago, where they showed that sulfur-amended compost not only increased the amount of sulfur in the canola plants, but it also increased the level of many other nutrients in the canola plants. And I think this aspect is an interesting one. You know, it's, as I mentioned before in other presentations, it's a really good example of Wallace's law of the maximum. By doing something very, very simple, very, very foundational, you're actually improving the efficiency or the availability of a whole host of other nutrients. Next, Daniel. All right, so again, third-party stuff from this year, fall applied Bio-Sul asked the agronomist to go out and take tissue samples, not only of the new leaves, but also the old leaves. And so what we're looking at here is the results from the old leaves, and you can see that the sulfur levels in the old leaves are awesome. Maybe not so awesome for some of the other nutrients. So let's go to the next slide. Here's the top leaf. The top leaf is even better when it comes to sulfur. It's better when it comes to other nutrients as well. And I think we have a comparative slide now looking at the top leaf and the bottom leaf. So if you just click one more time, Daniel. Maybe not. Yeah. What's going on? I don't know what's going on there, Daniel. All right, so what we have here then is a comparison with the top graph is representing the top leaves, and the bottom graph is representing the bottom leaves. And you can see that we're not only impacting the sulfur levels, but we're also impacting other nutrient levels. And the reason I'm using these examples is that they're all third-party. They're very representative of the information that we're seeing over and over and over and over again from all kinds of different trials with all kinds of different crops and all kinds of different application scenarios, whether it's fall application or spring application or after seeding application. The results are repetitive, and when you consider that the bulk of this year's information is collected by third party, there's no chance of any bias in the information. I don't know what more we need to collect to give people more and more confidence in the product. Next, Daniel. So Neil Weens and I went on a bit of a tour here recently. I just want to touch briefly on some of the microbiology that we bumped into when we were primarily in Montreal. Next, Daniel. We met a young lady at the Montreal airport. She's a microbiologist who is specializing in compost. Gave her some samples, subsequently sent her some other samples. And if you just keep continuing, she basically came up with a couple of different reports that I entitled Microbe Porn. And I just want to show you some of the imagery that she's obtained from Bio-Sul Premium Plus. Again, these were supposed to be funny little GIFs, but for whatever reason they're not working. Keep going, Daniel. And what this young lady has been able to identify is that there are very specific and unique organisms in Bio-Sul Premium Plus that are essentially allowing the product to turn from big blocks of elemental sulfur down into the granulated product that we're applying, with everything from 1 micron to 4,000 microns, 5,000 microns in diameter, which is actually the key to the whole product. Keep going down, and there's just some more pictures. And it's imagery like this that kind of leads us to make some assumptions about how this whole process is translating. Suffice to say that within the composted material, you have very specific microbial organisms that's allowing the product to not only break down in the fashion that it is as a physical product, but that are also somehow kick-starting the product once it's applied to the soil. Continue. And it's images like this that kind of get me excited about what we're dealing with here. I'm pretty geeky. It's microbe porn, but it's pretty cool. And just to restate, there's very specific organisms in the soil or in the compost with Bio-Sul that make it quite unique out there in the elemental sulfur world. So with that, I think we're done. I don't know if there's any more questions, or if I can add anything. Suffice to say that the third-party data is flowing in. I've selected a few examples that are representative of that data flow. The data is consistent, picked a worst case scenario that kind of shook me a little bit when it first happened, but if at the end of the day what it showed is that with a little bit of cooperation from Mother Nature, Bio-Sul kicks in and basically kicks butt. Dan talked about how quickly this stuff can work. Well, in that worst case scenario, we're talking literally, a handful of days, and we went from, good levels to super rocking levels of sulfur in the newest tissue. I don't know what else I can add here, Dano.
Can you talk a little bit about the extent and the locations and the nature of the third-party trials that you have going on?
Well, they're scattered all over Alberta and Saskatchewan. We even have some in northern Manitoba. We've got trials with New Era in Swan River. We've got trials with what's the research association up in the Peace Country? Gonzo. Third-party stuff everywhere. And I don't know the exact numbers of them, but as usual, if you have 50 trials out there, maybe only 25 are going to come back with following the protocol, but there'll be an absolute avalanche of third-party stuff available this fall, this winter for people to utilize with their customers to give them more confidence. To suffice to say, everything that's coming in it's the same old, same old. Bio-Sul is available quickly. Bio-Sul is available over a period of time. The fact that we're putting on 154 pounds plus per acre is part of the puzzle, why it's so successful. The particle sizes ranging from 1 micron to 4,000 or 5,000 microns is the other part of the puzzle. Organisms in the compost, specific organisms in the compost, another part of the puzzle. It kind of gets repetitive after a while, but the information that's coming in from the third-party stuff is basically telling the same story that we were finding in the last season. So I'm getting more and more confident all the time with the whole concept of carpet bombing fields with large amounts of elemental sulfur in the form of Bio-Sul, and getting that whole logistical nightmare out of your system so that you can start paying attention to other things. One of the rare opportunities where logistics and agronomics mesh up. Many of you have heard me say that many times, but it's truly one of the few places where logistics and agronomics actually work hand in hand, and the third-party data showing it.
And is there any news on the 3-year shorter-term product you guys been working on?
Yeah, just out with Neil this past week, doing some more work with more research work with that material, and I think the last I heard is it's likely going to be available for spring. Having said that, there's been a little bit of conversation in the network about lower rates of application with the existing product, and I think for those veterans out there, if we reflect back a couple of years and look at and consider what the product looked like 2 years ago compared to what it looks like today, it's quite a bit different. And in the right scenarios, I would be confident in suggesting that folks might want to put on, in the right scenarios, i.e. Aggressive sulfur user in the past, elemental sulfur user in the past. Dan, you alluded to this, the previous application of elemental sulfur is going to speed up the next conversion of the next application of elemental sulfur. there's likely a number of scenarios out there where we could get away with less than 220 pounds per acre with this existing product. But for sure in the spring when the release product is available, 2 to 3 years worth of sulfur at a much lower rate of application will be entirely legit based on the research that we've done so far.
Well, I would add too that the whole product and the whole bring it to market complex in terms of infrastructure and production is going to advance. They're working on the production is actually starting at Regina, and they're going to have more sophisticated equipment there to do even better job of QC and product consistency, and there's some new opportunities there on the horizon with things like liquid sulfur. Can continue to bring the same kind of theme, but maybe even a better product. And I think there's going to be lots of new developments with the sophistication the manufacturer we're dealing with now.
Yeah, for sure. And the liquid sulfur piece, once that all gets sorted, is going to be a game changer because the consistency can be dramatically improved for that shorter term product, for the release product especially. So yes, there's lots of research going on in the background with new products. Like I said, Neil and I were playing around with a bunch of stuff last week, looking to the future. There's a product that we've kicked around that's got gypsum in it, so you have slow release biological sulfur and you got slow release chemical sulfur. Another one for about 18 or 20 million acres that has a lime component in it. So all of that research continues, and pretty excited about all of it. But at the end of the day, the stuff that's coming back from the existing product, which I think next year will be called Sustain, the third-party results are basically corroborating stuff that we've seen previously. So it gives me a tremendous amount of confidence in the whole concept.
Perfect. Well, let's wrap it up there. Thanks everybody for your attendance on the long weekend and in the middle of harvest. And we're going to make this recording available to you on YouTube, and we'll let you know on social media where you can find it and how to watch it at your leisure. Good luck, everybody out there finishing harvest. Stay safe. Thanks so much, Elston, again, for your hard work and your wisdom and your passion for the product and for helping producers. And everybody take care. Take care. Thanks for attending.
See you, Daniel. See you, everybody.
See you, Elston.
Thanks so much.